my name is Dumani Mandela. I'm a director at Capital Software, which is a financial technology company here in South Africa, dealing mostly in the payment space and crypto space as well. For my social initiative, I have a social initiative called My Minimalists, which deals mainly with mental health care in South Africa and providing mental health care to the underserviced. Like many other people who know Nelson Mandela as a politician, I don't know that side of him very well. I know him as a family man and a man who was a principled pragmatist. And it's in that role that I understand him as a freedom fighter, um, as being mostly a principled pragmatist who wanted the best not only for his country, as he said in his speech, he fought both against black and white domination, and he wanted some kind of egalitarian society here in South Africa. So I espouse to those kind of values myself personally, to continue that legacy to develop some kind of egalitarian society here in South Africa. I think apartheid was much more than about the idea of, giving black people equal rights, but giving people equal access, both black and white, in a free South Africa. So I think those are values to be espoused to by any patriotic South African here. And I think his noble gesture as a freedom fighter will be remembered for generations to come. Well, on a personal and familial level, I think I've been largely influenced by what I said is Nelson Mandela's principled pragmatism, that nothing can be done in business or in society without a sense of principles and underlying ethics that underline it. Uh, Also complemented by a certain sense of leadership, what I call leadership transparency. So I try to inculcate those values within my business as well. Um, and obviously, the issue of race in South Africa is something that still plays itself out both in society and in business. And I think it's one of the fights of his that we continue to legitimize the idea of a free and democratic South Africa with equal access for all. So, on a personal level, I've been largely influenced by that sense of principle pragmatism, as I've said, to bring that kind of equal parity in terms of equal participation in the business sector, but not in politics because I'm not a professional politician. So, yeah, that's my perspective on that. I think I had written a previous report to you around the home token and kind of like the origins of thinking around African fiscal integration, which emerged really from the former head of Ghana named Kwame Nkrumah, who wrote a book, Africa Must Unite. So, in his perspective, ideology and politics weren't enough. We needed something more to unite the African continent, and that was a common monetary policy. And I think that's where the role that the home token can play is creating that environment to be able to catalyze a common economic policy or fiscal policy through the home token in terms of it becoming, a Pan-African token in the future, but not only limited as a Pan-African token, but a global token, which also attracts, the African diaspora and people who identify with the values of Nelson Mandela, and also just basically crypto enthusiasts who might want to acquire the future gold standard of cryptocurrency in South Africa and Africa and in the world. I think home token will become the gold standard in the next 10 years in terms of cryptocurrency, not only from a utility aspect, but the ability to save on the long term as well. Well, with regards to the home token, we've started speaking to regulators both in South Africa and on the African continent with regards to bringing it in and integrating it to the already existing bank market by being kind of building bank rails into the banks, and also into regulators here on the African continent. So we're not going to pursue the model that's really been done in, let's say, the US and Europe in terms of doing it outside the formal banking environment, but creating unique rails into the banking sector. So we bring them in and we make it as a value added component of our financial system. And this we want to do because we don't want to pose a moral hazard to the financial system, because unlike America, where the markets are worth 20 trillion US dollars and Bitcoin is worth 500 billion US dollars, it doesn't cause a moral hazard in terms of that it could be a systemic risk. But in South Africa, for an example, with the future valuations of House of Mandela token at 52 billion US dollars, if something happens and it's an accepted form of tender or legal tender, both in South Africa and Africa, and there's a crash, it could become a moral hazard. So that's why our ambition is really not to operate outside of the regulators and also the formal banking space, but bringing them in as partners. So people, when they convert their tokens into fiat, they can go and do it through their local bank, which they already have trust in, and bringing those institutions, as trusted issuers of the token as well, by acting both as issuers and as merchants. So that's why I say, our strategy is to really integrate ourselves with the regulators and the banks and to grow it organically over 10 years to become a form of legal tender in most African countries, if not all. But obviously, starting out here in South Africa, because that's where our base is. But we plan to see in 10 years that House of Mandela token becomes, the Pan-African go-to digital asset that people hold both for value and also for daily trading and acquisitions. In South Africa, we are speaking to a number of quite big merchants, both in retail, because we think that they'll attract the kind of foot traffic that we want, and people carry out their daily transactions in the retail space. So for the utility aspect of the token, we're really aiming at retail. But both for South African and Pan-African reach, we plan to reach some of the big GSM operators here in South Africa, which which we refer to as the wireless operators here in South Africa, which both have South African and Pan-African reach, to kind of promulgate the token out there. I was speaking to a friend of mine from Switzerland the other day, and he says, with these digital assets, it's impossible not to bring in, what the new banks will be. And these new banks will be telecom operators, when regulation opens up and it gives them space to become banks as well. And with the digitization of assets and, the emergence of crypto and blockchain, the new banks that you'll see in 10 years' time will be your mobile operators, because they can already give out virtual money at the present moment and the ability to remit cross-border and internally wherever you are. So we think our major strategy will be to speak to the GSM operators to bring them on board, and then couple that with our big retail strategy here in South Africa to bring the foot traffic for retailers who are both in South Africa and on the African continent. So that's really our infant thinking around how we're going to bring on the merchants. But we plan for that strategy to be evolving over time and to be fluid. So we're not opposed to smaller merchants as well, which we'll bring on over time. But obviously, because of the heavy lifting that's involved, both on the contract and integration side, we prefer to bring on the bigger merchants first, and then to bring on the smaller merchants, because it's going to cost us just as much time to bring on massive merchants as it will be to bring on small merchants. So our strategy is to kind of create that catalyst with big merchants and then move on to the smaller merchants, because the idea is obviously the democratization of access to the financial markets. And you can't do that without bringing on smaller merchants, irrespective of whether or not you lose money by bringing them in, because of the time it takes and the heavy lifting it takes to bring smaller merchants is the same as it takes to bring bigger merchants. So that's our infant thinking around it. But we plan for it to develop, with our partners Forum Pay and our partners Capital Software in South Africa, and we aim for it to be a fluid strategy in entry into the market. At the present moment in time, we're about 6-7 months ahead of regulation here in South Africa and also on the African continent, because what has happened is that BankServe, which was our national switch, is creating the digital platform for people to be able to acquire digital assets and to pay via proxy. Payment via proxy means that you can pay from your cell phone or you can pay from your email to any formal bank account. And that system in South Africa, for an example, will be online by March 2023, and then the regulator will have to approve it as well. So we're looking really about middle of next year. So we're well ahead of the curve. So we've got about a 12-month window at the present moment in time from the launch of the home token in late September 2022 to June 2023 to really integrate and bring on the various merchants that we'll need to roll out the home token to the basic individual. But In that meantime, we will have a web presence that we would develop with FormPay and a unique, market entry strategy that we would develop for people to be able to acquire the tokens via their home token website. But in the interim, in the next 12 months, we will be engaging merchants quite actively here in South Africa, so that by when regulation catches up in June 2023, it's all systems go for us. My name is Dumani Mandela, and I represent House of Mandela. And if you'd like to get access to the House of Mandela token, please visit www.houseofmandela.com and acquire one of our tokens, which we believe will be the next gold standard in the digitization of assets here in South Africa and on the continent. Thank you very much.